What's up, y'all? You know, I say it like that sometimes. That's kind of just become my way of coming into these videos on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company as well. What's up, y'all? Yeah, what's up? Today's the 4th. It's the 5th. Today's the 5th of October, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. This is In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 164, titled Don't Get Too Big for Your Dog. Okay, and we'll get into it. We'll talk about it as in literally, because 1/4 of In the Image Clothing Company is In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, and we specialize in purebred standard poodles. I'll talk about what we do on each of the 4 sides of In the Image Clothing Company and where clothing sits, and then we'll really get into this. But not only getting too big for our dogs, as far as not thinking we're better than being able to take care of our own pets, even if it's not a dog, but animals of our own. Not in any kind of degrading way, but just seeing what that means, correlating it with even friends of ours or hobbies of ours, things that we did in the past, and maybe we kind of feel like we grow out of these things when really we don't. We become too busy sometimes, or become, in our minds, we think that we're too big or too old for certain things, or we've graduated on past something that really is a good thing. Like kind of humbling yourself to a degree to take care of a pet. So we'll get into it. We'll talk about it deeply, but we'll do the intro, okay? This is In the Image Clothing Company Podcast. Like I said, what we do here is have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. We just talk about life as it is. We're all human beings, the same thing, placed on one earth here. We have one God who designed us, Jesus Christ, in his image. That's where our company name comes from, In the Image Clothing Company, 5 words as a whole. So, yeah, we do it blunt, bold, raw, real, right? In the Image Clothing Company style, if you will. And we do it imperfectly, right? Well, I mean, I can't really have any kind of final say on discussing who God is, other than we do read his word, right? Read the Word of God is an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast where we read the documented words of Jesus Christ in the Holy Bible. We read the Book of Mormon. I'm personally a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, yeah, okay, there we go. In the Image Clothing Company podcast. We've got 3 other sides to us, though. We'll go to the main side next. The main side of In the Image Clothing Company, what we really do is allow the human body to work. That's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, allowing the body to work. But we do it through everything. We talk about sleeping, eating, breathing, walking, standing, sitting, hydration, doing everything we do in our lives, but we address it through clothing. There's only one way the human body could ever work. It's just a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space. We discuss the anatomy of the human body in depth, and we have to come at it through what's physically placed on us, which is our clothing. Clothing has to stay centered, fit correct, where I'll discuss when I talk about where clothing sits, and be made from 100% natural materials, because the human body's natural. And these unnatural materials are only decades old, and they can bring things like stretch. Stretch goes the opposite direction of the only way that muscles could ever work. Every muscle in the body only contracts or gets shorter to work. So, clothing. Yeah, the body has a center line. The sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, and our jaw. The things I mentioned, these things have to stay in the center. The jaw naturally is stabilizing the entire body, and Earth's gravity has a center line that it pulls down on everything with. So, there you go. That's why clothing has to stay centered. Okay, we give a lot of free modifications in clothing. We just give discussions on the human body and its natural functioning in life and its anatomy. And then In the Image Clothing Company clothing will always be wonderful, right? Allowing the body to work in all the ways that it needs to. We'll have those things at least behind our intent of every design we ever put out. So there you go. Okay, InTheImageClothingCompany.com. Now, another one of our fourths is In the Image Clothing Company Poodles. We specialize in purebred standard poodles. We breed poodles, and we do this properly. We register our dogs under the American Kennel Club. We give our dogs birth certificates, keeping less dogs in shelters and more dogs at homes. A lot of advocating gets had, if you will, under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles for being a proper owner of a dog. How to, right? There's a lot that we really do that's more than just the breeding program that we have, more than In the Image Clothing Company dog products, right? Where same like our human being clothing, same thing, right? Our collars have to stay centered around our necks because there's musculature going through them. As I do this with my neck, right? For those of you in visual plus audio of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, I can contract the musculature in my neck and you can see it coming up through the collar of my top. This is how dogs are as well. We place collars on dogs, and sometimes we place dog tags on collars that are noisy and that are jingling around and heavy maybe, right? Collars, leashes, harnesses, and similar things will always have staying centered and doing all the same things behind the intent that we do for human being clothing for the human body, because we let dogs stay natural. That's our slogan on In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, because dogs are placed in a modern man-made world, and so are we as human beings. We just talk about being in the world, but not of the world, like we're commanded by God to be. And our dogs need help, they need to be able to be fed properly and hydrated properly, and they really need to be unrestricted. And sometimes they are very, very restricted by just their collar alone, pulling down on their neck. Um, there's a lot that goes into that. So, yeah, In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, okay? Events. We have events under In the Image Clothing Company, but one of the big things we do is poodle parade events under our poodles side of things, In the Image Clothing Company Poodles. Here in the state of Utah, the United States of America, that's where we're based as In the Image Clothing Company. We'll have a lot of these. A lot, okay? Poodle parade events. In nature, we've got beautiful mountains. It's maybe going to be at parks for some of them, maybe clear up on a decent hike somewhere in the mountains, maybe in waterways with Clean the Creek specific poodle parade events where we actually do things for the environment and pick up trash with our dogs and just have fun. But that's what a lot of them will be, is just fun. Kind of like a big family reunion. You can bring your own dogs, purebred poodles of any size or poodle mixes of any size, and we'll just hang out. I'll give a lot of information though on letting dogs stay natural as well. And one of the big things we talk about is interacting with our dogs as owners, right? Holding leashes to take our dogs on walks can actually really damage our bodies as the owners. So we talk about holding leashes naturally and, debunking a lot of things on why dogs don't listen to commands. There's a lot that we do, okay? I mean, just noise around the collar of a dog's neck, jingling right next to its ears, it's distracting for the dog, right? Simple things like this is all we need to know a lot of the time to really change our whole experience with, well, life in general for us as human beings and our dogs. So there's a little bit of a rundown on In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, but we have also one other fourth, In the Image Clothing Company Music. I show a lot of sizing and setup of guitar to not alter things like the neutral wrist. Not only is there a center line to the body, but there's a neutral position to every joint, a neutral to every internal or external rotation that joints have in the body, and a neutral just in all the directions that the body can move, in the shoulders and the jaw and the wrist and the ankles and the hips, right? Parts of the body that have motion, there's a neutral to everything that could move in either direction outside of the neutral. So I do that with guitar setup and sizing, right? Just give information there, but there's a lot of music that I make and place on In the Image Clothing Company Music. I do lyricism, right? Metronome madness is one of the things that I do. Freestyling messages through, you could call it spoken word, poetry, rap, around the gospel of Jesus Christ. We just, get deep with the messages that we do under all that we do within the Image Clothing Company. A lot of this is just kind of journal entries, kind of, yeah, I mean, just discussions on a lot. That's a lot of what we are as a company as well. Um, I'm really good at speaking. So I love to do it, and I do it. I love it, as I just said. So there's a little bit of the four sides of us in the Image Clothing Company. Now, for everybody, if you are a man or a woman, tall or short, skinny or fat, any age or from any part of the earth, any time period to ever be, you're just a human being. Your clothing has to sit in the same location as everybody else because the human body only has one way that it could ever work, and clothing will damage it if it's placed on it incorrect. Oversized clothing, ropes introduced to the body, like shoelaces, drawstrings, damage. Okay, stretching clothing, like we mentioned. I was the one that mentioned it. Okay. But our pants need to be entirely above our hips, at what's called our natural waist, where we bend side to side at our spine. Then our hips are unaltered from the pant waistline not being on them. The waistline of our pants needs to be slightly higher in the front than the rear because that's just how we keep our bodies activated and neutral vertically on Earth's gravity. Tops that we wear have seams on top of our shoulders that need to sit evenly behind the peak of our shoulders. Our shoulders just only ever work behind our head. That's just where they connect mechanically, and they follow the seams of our tops. So there you go. Okay. The edge seams of our tops should be at the edges of our shoulders, meshing the joint of the material with the joint of the shoulder. Okay. Then we just don't have alteration to the functionality of the shoulder joint. We have two things we call prerequisites under In the Image Clothing Company to not alter the body. Firstly, shoelaces. Just ropes weaved across the top of our feet, but our feet have tendons, bones, muscles, ligaments, gripping arches inward, opposing the center line of the body and keeping us vertical on Earth's gravity. So, In the Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique is actually the only way you can weave a rope across the top of the feet without altering your whole body to the tip of your head or the tips of your fingers. Included with that is tying our shoes, and that's very rotational, okay? Taking one side of a knot and putting it over the other, meaning one side of a rope and tying a knot with it with one side over the other. Yeah, okay, we have to tie our shoes evenly over toward the center line of the body. I know some people do this, right? For their whole life, since they started tying shoes, they just knew to tie them evenly. Whoever taught them probably just showed them that. But I was 24 before I started tying my shoes even. My whole body was taking a beating to everything. The tip of the head, the tips of the fingers. And I know that's the case for a lot of people. I have an eye for body mechanic workings, if you will. I can see, because I know the anatomy of the human body well, and I know what's needed in clothing. That's the whole point of the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, is those two things, really, right? And the correlation between them. And so I can walk around and just see what is going on in people's bodies mechanic-wise and what's not working so well and where it's coming from because of what's placed on their bodies and lifestyle things as well, right? Living in the right-handed world, as we talk about, we get into a right-handed patterning, in a sense, more, falling off to our right side, externally rotated, the musculature is being pulled on, and our right side's more dropped than the left. But a lot of this comes from just uneven shoe tying. So, yeah, it depends on who you are. Some people have never had to deal with that. Some people are severely in deep chronic patterning and scar tissue, which is what we get out of under the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. That's the point of discussing what we do and how to allow the body to work. Yeah, it's a process too. It's a journey, right? Not a walk in the park. An episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast where I've spoken on my experience doing what our company's founded on, what I founded it to be. It's a lot to go through. Really getting our bodies out of imbalances built up from years, decades. But yeah, secondly, to shoelacing, we remove all tags from clothing. Anywhere a tag is placed in clothing, it's either causing a physical gap, changing the body's only working position, and or it just doesn't allow musculature to activate where the tag is, and the body tries to do compensation, but everything in the body has a role to play. It all has to be able to do its thing and stay activated as a whole. That's just the only way the body actually works, okay? Just imagine nothing was ever placed on the body. It would all work together how God designed it to, but can't do that well at all, and it really just can't do it at all if we place things on it throughout our days, throughout our lives, that are not accommodating for the only way that it operates. Being just a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space, right? The human body. So let's get into this, because this is awesome. This idea. Don't get too big for your dog. Um, Picture being a kid, right? And you've got a dog that you love, and you don't really have any kind of like obligations besides your dog. Maybe it's a family pet, maybe it's your pet individually, but your parents are paying for the food for your dog, and whatever it comes to being for you to have the dog, which that's a big thing, is that's really all dogs need. It's one of the things we talk about under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, is dogs aren't as big of a thing as a lot of people think they are. A lot of people buy so many toys for their dogs. They buy treats all the time. They buy clothing for their dogs that, times and places. We're a clothing company. We'll see what we do with products as far as what you could call dog clothing. But, we don't need that much for our dogs, really. A good solid collar, a good solid leash. Slip leads are great. I love slip leads. We'll talk about that more too as we do, and I have already actually some before now under In the Image Clothing Company Poodle content. But you know, our dogs really just need food, and that's about it. You give dogs too many treats, and they'll become too food motivated, and they'll get overweight, and then you'll feel like you have to walk them more than you actually need to, and they won't be very healthy. And sometimes they just don't want to listen to you until you give them a treat. If you just correlate obedience with treats only, if you give your dog a treat, if you want to call it that, just give them one little piece of kibble, right? Just give them their same food, but just right after they do something you ask them to, and that's a treat enough. It doesn't have to be anything special, and actually, that can really cause your dog to be overweight. Um, yeah, really, just food is just about all your dogs need. Um, that's a big thing, and I've been thinking about this, and we'll always show what we do under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles for our dogs specifically, but they're not as big of an expense as people have them be, because people are buying all of these things, and then toys, which unnatural materials the dogs are chewing on and swallowing. So many surgeries have to happen for dogs just to get what's branded as a dog toy out of their intestines and stomach and digestive system, because they swallowed, synthetic material, or like stringy rope type stuff, or bone that broke off of something that was branded for a dog specific, but it gets stuck in their stomach, internal bleeding. Man, I don't want this to sound like, like morbid, if you will. But this is a lot of what we do under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles with letting dogs stay natural is, your dogs don't really need toys. They can chew on sticks outside, and that's probably just about it. You don't want your dogs to be used to chewing on things, or they might chew on other stuff in your house, right? Or your own possessions. And dogs don't really need treats. Just feed them food. Dog food specifically too, not human food. That's how we keep them healthy. So we'll get into this in depth. I'm here for life. In the Image Clothing Company Poodles is here for life, right? Me as the founder of In the Image Clothing Company is what I mean. I'm doing this for my whole life, so we'll definitely talk about it deeply, and you'll be able to see it with all the poodles we have, and we'll show what we do, and so it's not just me talking about it. You'll actually get to see. We do so much under the gift of video, so check out In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, just whenever you'd like to. As time progresses, we'll have a lot more that you can check out than we do today for poodles specifically, but. And a big thing to mention, I say this, but I should probably say it pretty clearly, pretty often, so people don't, you know, miss out on information. Our information we give under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles applies to all dogs, besides things that are very specific to poodles, certain grooming things or temperament stuff, right? Things like that that would be just poodle specific. Otherwise, yeah, we're just giving information and products that can be applied to or used for just about all dogs, right? Pretty much every dog. Yeah, on the earth. In the Image Clothing Company poodles. But anyway, that was a little bit of a side note of just some good information. Not exactly what I'm saying about don't get too big for your dog, although that's some really good information that will, like I'm saying, deepen and talk on it and talk about a lot as time progresses, and as we actually have our own dogs here to show it with. But yeah, picture you're a kid and your dog's like your whole world, You don't have a job to go to. You don't have, friends that are trying to schedule things with you where you have to, try to like block out things in your calendar, and you don't have a busy schedule where you feel like you don't have enough time for your dog, as sometimes people feel like, when they get older. But when you're just a little kid, your dog is your whole world, right? A lot of times you have little kids and their dog is like their everything, you know, and they put their dog's importance above other things in their life. But then sometimes we can, as human beings, just essentially get too big for our dogs, meaning we get too busy to take care of our dogs, to give our dogs attention or go on walks with our dogs. When as a kid, that's all we wanted to do. I didn't have a good, I've never had my own dog. But just like, I was kind of speaking as a general human race, right? And our relationship with what gets called man's best friend, right? Dogs. Um, yeah, Nita, when I get her, will be my first dog. Okay. Purebred standard poodle, she'll be the first one in the whole in the whole poodle family that's going to be huge. Number wise and impact wise, just all we do through that. It'll be awesome, right? But yeah, I've never had my own dog as of yet, as of today's date. So we see it though, and you know it if you've had a dog as a kid. As you get older, sometimes it's like, man, now you're going to school or you're going to work or you have a boyfriend for those girls out there. You've got a girlfriend for those boys out there, and some things are taking up your time and attention, and you almost kind of outgrow your dog in a sense. You almost get too big for your dog, too busy with life for your dog. You kind of forget that childlike love that you had just sitting with your dog in the backyard or, at the park in the grass and the dirt, just hanging out, throwing a ball or a stick for your dog if your dog likes that, right? Careful with sticks. You don't want dogs to try to catch a stick and have it go poking down their throat or in their mouth, causing bleeding and, tears to their tissues of their body, right? Seriously, yeah. And same thing, unnatural materials, a lot of these dog balls and stuff that we throw for dogs, it's made out of stuff that should never be in the mouth of a dog. It's toxifying them, regardless of what the label says about it being safe or whatever. Stuff's made out of just like oil, all these synthetic materials. So, a lot of stuff, again, that we advocate for under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles. Natural dog toys, if you're going to give your dog a toy, but the most natural toy is just like a stick, right? But yeah, be careful with stuff like that. You don't want your dog swallowing anything besides food. You don't want your dog's mouth getting cut up or their throat getting cut up. You don't want toxification. You don't want things getting stuck in their digestive system. There's a lot, right? A lot to think about that people don't, and a lot that actually comes problem-wise with things that are branded for dogs specifically. It's like human being clothing. A lot of stuff gets sold. I've said it like this before. It's like so much stuff just gets passed off as clothing nowadays. It's not clothing. It's damaging our bodies. Stretchy, synthetic stuff we place on us, right? Imbalanced designs. So anyway, you don't know what you don't know. You can't be held accountable for what you don't know. But In the Image Clothing Company is here to really shine some light on truth, right? To the best of what we can. That's what we do. So anyway, as you get older, you kind of get busy in life, and it's like, man, I remember what it was like sitting there with my dog, and it's like he or she was my whole everything, but now it's like, well, I'd love to take the dog on a walk, but I've got, an assignment due for some schooling you're doing, or I've got, work I've got to get done, or I've got appointments with my friends, or whatever it is, you know what I mean, in life. we can kind of get too big for our dogs, and that's not good. Takes away that childlike aspect of us, and kind of like can allow us to, in a not so great way, get detached from just nature. And that's one thing we talk about with dogs is they can really ground people, as in like bring them back rooted again to just being authentic, getting people into nature. That's one of the big things with poodle parade events. People who wouldn't otherwise either know how to or even just do it because they wouldn't really have a reason, but they'd want to, maybe, right? Get into nature and whatever we could word that as. People who just maybe wouldn't otherwise go on a hike or just see the mountains or just sit in the grass. But dogs can really do these things for people, give them opportunities that they maybe wouldn't do without the dog. And there you go. Poodle parade events under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, right? Check scheduling, InTheImageClothingCompany.com. The state of Utah, the United States of America, is where, if not every single one of them, almost every one of them will be. Okay? Probably every single one of them. We're staying in Utah, man. In the Image Clothing Company. So, yeah, beautiful though. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful nature here. And that's the thing, is the dogs bring out this childlike aspect in people that's so beautiful. And you see this, like a big macho man, he can get around a little chihuahua, right? One of those little small dogs, or any dog, but just the contrast of some big macho muscular man and just this really small dog, and all of a sudden this big man turns into this like little kid, lighthearted and loving, and he's talking in this like voice that like speak to a baby or a little dog in. um oh, you cute little doggy, and it's like this big dude. This is what happens, this is a big thing with In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, like I'm saying. A lot of beautiful things. It's not just about cute puppies and, making money through breeding. It's not just about selling dog products, but we do we do a lot. And you'll see as time progresses, and I've been saying it, right? It's been months and months since I've been talking about In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, and well, as of today's date, we still don't have any poodles yet. But you'll see. You'll see and you'll see. I think it's gonna be shocking to whoever it shocks, right? How big it'll be. You'll see. You will see. I'm speaking on it as much as I am for a very, very, very big reason. Okay. But we can't get too big for our dogs. And that's the thing, is that's what dogs can do for people, is humble them. They really can. Like I'm saying, you'll take this big dude, maybe this person seems prideful or they seem like they're domineering, and you get this little puppy dog in their hands and they turn into a puppy dog in a sense, right? That's what I mean. It kind of brings you back down to this level of natural. I mean, yeah, yeah. Don't get too big for your dogs. Man, and that's the thing too, is just putting importance on your dog. Don't, if you do have a dog, don't get too busy for your dog's care. We really need to, as we advocate for under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, be good owners of dogs. If we're going to own an animal, we need to give it the best life we can. Otherwise, it would just be free, right, and wild and do its own thing. Now, dogs are domesticated and they don't do well out there on their own because of what we've done through breeding. They rely on their owners. But that's what I'm saying, right? We need to not be too busy for our dogs. We need to really take care of them. We really need to give them the time that they need. And I mean, a lot of what dogs need more than exercise is just attention. Um, you know, you don't need to walk dogs as much as people will tell you you do. What you need to do is just be present with your dog. A lot of it's just the feeding, right? So the dogs don't get overweight. It's more common than not, without knowing the actual statistics, at least probably, for people to feed their dogs much more than they actually need. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but a lot of it's just misunderstanding and not knowing what your dog actually needs, but just knowing that it needs to eat. And so you just keep feeding it, and feeding it, right? But that's the big thing with not getting too big for your dog. It doesn't have to mean that you have to do something like just a walk, and you don't want to just go on some simple walk with your dog. It's boring to you. Well, do something that your dog wants to do and let your dog teach you kind of what it's like to be a kid again, what it's like to be natural again, what it's like to sit on the ground in the grass, or out in nature. I mean, even if you're like somebody who can't walk all that well, maybe you're in a wheelchair or you're handicapped some way, you've got crutches. That's what I mean. You don't have to go on a walk with your dog. You can sit there and just let your dog kind of stroll around and give your dog attention, and that excitement will be enough, in a way, and to a degree at least, depending on the situation, but to give your dog like the exercise they need. Seriously, the elevated heart rate that comes with your dog being excited to see you, or you having attention on it, can actually burn calories, like your dog going on a walk. Okay. Yeah, right. It's exercise. It truly is. Like laughing. You know how you laugh and it feels like you just did sit-ups, right? And like did an abdominal workout, a core workout. That's how the dogs are too, when they're just excited to see you and you're just spending time with them. So just don't get too big for your dogs, Don't outgrow your dogs. Don't feel like your life and your worldly things are more important than this beautiful creation of God's, our dogs. Okay? But this can come in a lot of ways because, like I was saying, not to be, talking down on people, but if we can think about somebody in our life like that dog that we played with as a kid, in other words, like friends that we had, and we feel like we kind of outgrew them, right? Like how with our dogs, we love them as children, and then maybe life kind of seems to take over and we feel like we're on to bigger and better things. That's what I mean. No, you're not. You're still the same person. You are still the same person as you were when you were born, and really since before you were born, right? Created by Jesus Christ, we're his children. We're not anything the world could tell us to be, right? That's where our true identity comes from. That's where our true worth comes from, and it never changes. Jesus Christ determines our worth, and he also decided who we are, and that will never change, period. And so sometimes we have friends as kids or at certain times in our lives, and then we feel, even though they were like our absolute best friends at a certain time, that maybe we kind of like outgrew them. It's like I'm doing bigger things than this person. I don't really want to spend time with them anymore. And there is a level of, kind of going in directions that are different, and maybe not having it be such a good thing to be around people that you used to be around, because maybe you're trying all you can to live a pretty godly life, and maybe they're not so much doing that. That's not what I mean. That's one of those situations where, yeah, it is entirely not only okay, but actually the right decision to step away from people like that, and if and where you can in your life, and you can. Don't let me try to speak for you. Everyone has their own situations, but most always people, if they feel like they can't get out of a situation, they can. It's just, sometimes a hard emotional or mental thing to do, but you can and should, if it's not a good relationship for you, right? And I've mentioned this type of a thing, in past episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. But as far as people who are good for you, and good people, kind-hearted, loving people trying to do all they can to live the kind of life we would be living as being disciples of Jesus Christ, right? Followers of God, and just being a good human being. Yeah, sometimes we kind of like lose touch with these people, and it seems like maybe we're on a higher level than them, right? But in situations where in all reality they're just still as great of a person as they were, and you're still the same person that you were, regardless of what you've added to your life, right? What successes, for example, or whatever has come. that's kind of saying the same thing as don't outgrow your dog. Don't get too big for your dog. Don't think you're too good for a friend you had in the past. If they're still an amazing person, go be around them, and that's something I see often is people kind of get a little bit egoic when they become something in the world, right? They get a titling. Now they're a manager of something. They're a CEO of something, which is chief executive officer. Ugh. Yeah, right. All these titles. And that's why I said, like, I'll always just call myself the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, even though I'm, in the position of what we could put all these labelings on. That means like the leader of this. Uh, I'm the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, even when it's huge and, in all the ways that it's actually huge as far as impact and spread. And well, because it's huge impact wise since the very beginning, since any one piece of valid, truthful information that we give, which would have been the very start, because that's the point, is giving eternal information, truth that will never change to the best of what we can. That's what we do under In the Image Clothing Company. Yeah, all four sides. That's why we're here, is to really, yeah, just give truth, to the highest degree that we can, being imperfect. But I mean, people will become the manager, and all of a sudden, the people that they were just on the same level with, now they're kind of like over, and it's like they treat them differently, similar to getting too big for their dog. And I've actually experienced this personally. Not that I changed my behavior, but I, experienced that promotion, if you will. I went from being just a entry-level employee, wow, a few different times, actually. I mean, yeah, in a few different ways at different jobs, to being a supervisor or a manager, right, in different situations. And man, yeah, I didn't feel so comfortable. I actually stepped down from being a supervisor at one point back to just an entry level employee because I didn't want to feel like I was above the people that I am not above. We're all equals, right? As human beings, we're just sons and daughters of God. Yeah, and it was kind of hard for me to not feel like I almost had to act like I was above these people because I'd be giving them, direction and orders and stuff. And so, I'm gonna have to be dealing with that with our team under In the Image Clothing Company. I mean, I've got to tell them what to do as the founder, as the leader of In the Image Clothing Company. I mean, I've got to really, kind of give commands to a degree in ways, but that's why there's this balance of, it's like back to the dog situation. As you do more in life, you have more of a life as you grow up than you did when you were a kid. When I say more of a life, I mean, that's not really the case, but we have more things going on in our lives. We get a car, maybe. We get a job, maybe. We get a relationship, maybe. We get our own place to live, maybe, right? Um, and whatever else we do, we just involve ourselves in more things. Maybe you're volunteering for things. Maybe you start something like me starting In the Image Clothing Company, right? Whatever it is, yeah. It's I mean, you're no you're no different than you were. I mean, you're still the same person, Always, right? Just a kid and always. That's a phrase I've been saying. I have that actually typed in my notes for a potential episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast to film and title it that. But because, yeah, I mean, we can't get too big for, well, really, we can say ourselves. That's how we are in cases of becoming too big for something. It's really us just feeling like we're something we're not. Because like the phrase I'd say, just a kid and always, uh, still a kid. I'm just a kid. I mean, always. I mean, it's good to be mature, but but being childlike, not childish, And as we talk about in scripture, the only way to enter the kingdom of heaven is to humble yourself and be like a little child, meek, submissive, loving, kind, forgiving, all these childlike attributes, and children just are good friends to each other. I've actually, talked about this on really recent episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Just children, and just, yeah, their demeanor like that. That's how dogs are, right? Dogs are like amazing children, so loving. And as we get too big for our dogs, right, but in the instances that happens, that we should try to do all that we can to not have happen, we kind of lose these qualities, and that's what I mean is becoming. Not that you have any problem by being a manager or by being a CEO, by being the head of a company or by being the leader of something. Those are all good things, but don't lose yourself in it. Don't get too big for who you are. Not only don't get too big for your dog, not only don't get too big for your childhood friends, but don't get too big for the authentic you. And, if we can see where we can go with the word big, and people who talk about people with an ego, right, who are big-headed, right, hot-headed, like, kind of full of themselves. Even that in itself, full meaning like big, these are the type of people that we put that labeling on. And any one of us and every one of us, hear that last word, us, myself included, right? Anyone can get like that easily. I mean, it's the human condition, wanting to be better because we don't want to feel inferior. So, yeah. But that's what these labels can really do for us is kind of cause us to act like we're too big for the people around us. All of a sudden you go from being somebody's coworker to being their manager. And it's like, nah, dude, not on your level anymore, bro. I got promoted. You know, that's what I'm saying is it was hard for me because I didn't have that attitude. And so I, in a lot of ways, still acted like I was more at that entry level position. Um, in times when I needed to like kind of tell people to do things, I would want to just do the things myself instead, because I didn't feel right about telling people what to do as being a manager in some of these instances, um, at all, because that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to bring people along with us, it's like, I've talked about it before. It's like having a really good father who, well, our Heavenly Father, that's what God does, when I talk about what we can really do for God, which there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled, I don't know the exact title for sure unless this is it, but What Could I Do for God might be the title. It's something along the lines of that, if not. Where God he's perfect, he's almighty, and he doesn't need help with anything at all. He's actually limitless. But he wants us to help him with certain things like preaching the good news or gospel, right, of Jesus Christ, and gathering Israel, which is what that is bringing people back to the truth of God in a fallen, lost, scared, man-made world. Bringing people back to God, to the truth, which is just another name for God. And he wants us to be involved with helping him with these things, but he doesn't need us to. And yeah, man, anyway, I don't even know exactly where I was going with that other than saying that right now, but we can't get too big for things because we're just not. Oh, well, that's what I was saying. That's the case, is we're just not too big for anybody else. We're not too big for what could seem like a simple, small task. I mean, that's really what it means to be humble in a lot of ways. That's where humility could be explained, is doing things that are like janitor jobs when you're the person that's at the very top of the building or even the business or the company. You're the CEO, you're the chief executive officer is what that means, but you're not too big in a sense. if you can see what I mean by that, to do like janitorial stuff in times, like changing garbage bags or cleaning something up off the floor. I mean, like with our poodles under In the Image Clothing Company poodles, picking up the doggy doo doo. I mean, it's not only a job for only a specific person, right? I mean, yeah, you can hire somebody and that can be their job, but it's not like you just ever get too big for jobs like this. Um, Again, something we can all struggle with, kind of like thinking that we're too good for this type of stuff. That's what I mean by too big. Um, yeah, and that's a hard thing. In some cases, we don't realize we're having this behavior because in a lot of ways we grow as human beings. And there is kind of a distinction between, yeah, don't do things that you've grown out of in a good way, but also don't feel like you're better than things either. It's got to be seen correct and with context. So that's the big point, is we have, yeah, just that being the case, I guess, right? Just don't get too big for things. And well, what I was saying about just having a really good father, and then I was like, well, yeah, God is our perfect heavenly father. Always there, always ever present, always loving us perfectly, knowing exactly what we need. We come along with him and help him with things, and so that's kind of what it comes down to when we need to have a good approach on, you know, being a leader in a sense. Man, see, this is a really cool discussion because it's about, hey, come help me with this, right? God says, come follow me, right? Come and see, like come. Not go do that thing, but come with me. And that could be a whole entire episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast in itself. Just the phrasing between those two things, the distinction between like giving a command and go do this versus come on, let's work on something together, right? Um, but in a lot of ways, that's kind of the big thing with not getting too big for your dog is we can get this idea that we're at a point in our life where we just don't do things that we used to do because we're too good for them. So we'll put that job on somebody else. But if we're too good for that job, to the degree that we end up trying to put it on somebody else, that's really us essentially saying we're too good for that person. Truly. Okay, and now we've crossed the line, which is easy to do in all the ways that it is as a human being, but it's not okay. It's not, whether it's me or anyone else doing that. I've definitely done it in ways for sure. So that's the thing is don't get too big for your dog. Don't get too big for the simple pleasures, if you will, in life. I don't just mean pleasurable things in the sense of doing things just for pleasure, but simple joys or simple things in life. A simple camping trip when maybe you have this really high-end camper or trailer type of thing, right? RV, recreational vehicle, with like a full house inside. Don't feel like just because you own that you're like too big or too good for just a simple overnight camp trip with a tent. Just throw your dog in the truck, get just food for your dog and, hydration for both of you. Go take a tent and some bedding and just make a simple fire and go up the mountains or wherever you are out in the desert, anywhere that you could camp. Just don't get too big for the simple things in life, the little things. An episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast's title, but it's about the little things, life really is. And we get less fulfilled if we're trying to seek big things to fulfill us. The only thing that we have is an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, and it is our human bodies. That's the only thing we actually have in this life. Otherwise, we don't have this life. It's what determines us being a human being, having a life or not, as in this physical existence on earth that God placed us in, right? This probationary state. It's a test. It's a learning process. It's just earth. It's just life. As they say, truly, right? Just coming from God's presence, being on this earth for a while in this man-made world, and then returning to God's presence after. And we just can't get too big for the simple things in life, because that's the thing, is we add things to our lives, and that's a big point with the human body is the only thing that we have. We put focus and importance a lot of the times as human beings, at least it's easy for us to do so, on things that are not us, and we kind of try to make it seem like those things are us. You've got this big RV, trailer, camper thing, right? It's like a house on wheels. And so now it's like, no, I've become this. A lot of people would say, and attach themselves to their possessions. And then they think they're too big or too good, in a sense, for just a simple camping trip. Even sleeping in the bed of the truck, or in the backyard, or even in the living room of your house, like inside your house, just putting up blankets or sheets like a fort, like a little kid, right? And let's say your dogs are there, or let's say it's just you and your wife, or it's just you, or it's you and your kids and your dogs, or something, right? Just the simplicity in life. Don't get too big for it. Don't outgrow it, because you don't outgrow it. So don't try to start acting like you have, because you just won't feel good. You'll feel so wrong doing it. It'll make you feel empty, actually. The more that you get, if you put the importance on what you've gotten. I mean, you can be somebody who has a whole lot of things, and that's fine. But, just keep your intentions in the correct place to the best that you can. It's like how I talk about money. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Money Hungry. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Why is Your House So Big? There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Power and Poverty. I talk about money in ways, and often, but just, and the point is that it's just money, right? It doesn't really exist. It's just a representation of value. It's always changing how it's displayed and how much it's worth versus how, like, many figures it is, like the actual number, right? It's just what it is. But at the same time, it's not bad to be like a millionaire, a billionaire, whatever it is. It's just a few years down the road, all of a sudden a billionaire is like somebody that's not that rich anymore. Do you see what I mean? Money's just what it is. But even if you have a lot of money, that's fine. Just don't get too big because of your money, right? Don't get too big headed, right? Don't get too big to do the little things because you've got big money, if you can see what I mean. You see what I mean? This happens, right? That's the point. That's why I'm making this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. 164. Don't get too big for your dog. Yeah, don't get too big for your dog. I mean, there's just such joy in just the simplicity of doing anything with your dog. I mean, that dog looking into your eyes when you're just sitting there with it on the grass, or standing there with it ready to throw something for it to catch. Golly, I mean, again, be careful. Be careful. Natural materials, and don't let your dog choke on sticks or bones and stuff, right? But I mean, it's just the simple things. It doesn't really get better than that. It's like a newborn baby, and all you want to do with your newborn child is just sit there and hold it, look at it. That's it. Don't get too big for that. All of a sudden your kid's like high school, college age, like teenager, 20 years old, whatever, and it's like you kind of feel like you're too big for your kid now. It's like, nah, do your own thing now. I've got my life to live. When you were a little kid, yeah, I took care of you a lot, but now, I've got to live my own life. If you still love your kid, if your kid's still a good person and they're treating you well, and you can treat them well, then, don't get too big for them. Don't get too big for the simple outings with people. Don't get too big for those, like, simple dates, if you will. When you're dating somebody or when you're first married, you just do simple things. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to have some big elaborate thing happen to call it a date or to have a good time together. But sometimes people just again, their life becomes more than them, and they try to attach themselves to their life, to the amount of money they have, to the lifestyles of some of the people around them who are already in this situation of seeming like they're too big for simplicity, right? Just don't get too big for simplicity. Don't feel like you have to match what you think you have become. Hear the phrasing correct, right? But that, because you are only who you are, still a kid and always, right? Oh, shoot. That's the phrase, man. That's awesome. Evan Strong, 2025, right? I coined it. Nah, just kidding, but kind of. I mean, I love that. I've never heard anyone say it just like that. That's my phrase, bro. Put a trademark on that thing. No, just kidding. Unless I end up doing it, but just don't get too big for the simple things, because the bigger the things get, the less they mean. I mean, that's real. That really is real. And this is something I've been thinking about, because I've been talking about it, and it'll be this way. We'll have a lot of poodles, but we're not just going to have like just so many poodles always running around just for the sake of having some like big breeding farm, or we're just pumping out puppies all the time. No, I mean, we're doing it intentionally, right, to further good bloodlines of dogs and show the process as well. That's a big thing, doing all that we can to film the litters. Every litter that we can film be born, that's a cool thing, to bring people along and educate people through it. But, we don't want to just have so many dogs to where we don't have enough attention to go around. We want to be able to give each individual dog as much one-on-one attention as we can, and this is the same with kids, with children, and with, like I was saying, friends, and just with even little hobbies in our lives and things that sometimes we feel like we've got too big for. We outgrew it. That's not cool, man. It's just not the case, it's us lying to ourselves, and we just don't feel very good because we become inauthentic if we don't stay rooted in who we were. Man, I did this like freestyle. Let's see how in tune Red is. Red the guitar with the capo off. Not very. I tuned him with the capo on. I'm not going to retune him right now. Let's see if I can even figure out what these chords are. Bear with me for a minute, because I did this freestyle one time. It was like, just like the tree in the front yard, I've got roots that I've got to stay attached to. I don't know what the chords were, for sure. Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know if it was capoed or what. I'm not gonna try to play it right now, but right? Just like the tree in the front yard, I've got roots that I've got to stay attached to. Meaning, like, we got to stay rooted. We've got to stay grounded. And that's a big thing that I've said, we'll always do under In The Image Clothing Company is really, I've worded it like this: live up Utah, right? We'll live Utah up. We will always, I mean, be proud of Utah. I'm a Utah native, if you will, right? I was born here. I'm staying here. In The Image Clothing Company's based here. This is where we are, man. Utah. Beautiful Utah. White-tailed deer, black bear. In the Image Clothing Company Poodle Parade events, right? Seriously, I mean, Utah, man. Don't get too big for your roots, right? Don't get too big for where you're from. I was trying to move to California last year, and I had removed my records voluntarily from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at the time, before I got rebaptized voluntarily also, right? The second time around. Check out that episode of In The Image Clothing Company Podcast. That's its title. But I was not in the right state of mind. I was not in the right state of being. I was not myself. I right, still a kid and always. In those instances there, I mean, through that, it was about 13 months, I was so not myself that I was trying to make decisions that was they were not me, right? I was definitely not in the right place. In the right place, in other words, the place to be. And don't believe me, but there's a reason, right? I'm not trying to push religion on people at all, but the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's where you'll find the biggest joy, the biggest, right? I think that word's kind of came in there intentionally rather than saying like the most joy that you could find on this earth, in this lifetime, but biggest, I mean, that's the big things. It's those little things, those little events and like church events, where we had general conference today and yesterday in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where the leaders of the church just delivered speeches, right, talks to the whole church worldwide. And I haven't really listened to much of any of it, actually, just part of one talk out of the many that there are each 6 months. It's bi-yearly. So far, that's all I've listened to out of this one. The fall, or October 2025 General Conference. Yeah, that's what this one was. But that's what I mean, is it, that's what I mean, yo. Is these things that kind of seem simple, they seem little, but this is where the really big amount of joy comes from in our lives. That's what I'm saying, I feel like I was somewhere before I started talking about the church and me having my records removed by myself, right, voluntarily, for a while, before I got rebaptized again. I don't remember exactly where I was going with it because I was making a point about roots. Utah, I mean, a lot of times people just feel like they're too big for their hometown. I mean, I was doing freestyles last year. It might have been 2 years ago, actually. Somewhere between there, though. Like, oh my gosh. Just talking about, like, getting out of this town. Like let's, like, oh, shoot. Just so much about, kind of like the whole cliche thing, like coming from a small town, becoming a pop star, a rock star, and going selling out big stages. Yeah, I was making so much music at that time, and I didn't know exactly where my life was going yet. Now I do, certainly, which is a crazy thing to be certain about, but I'm certain that I'm certain about it, which is amazing. In the Image Clothing Company, here for life. Evan Strong as the founder. There's 4 sides to us, man. Distinct sides, doing very big things, really, in all the ways that we do, and continually expanding to the degree that we do. I mean, this is what I mean, though. I'm staying in Utah, and there's a point of being placed where you're placed, right? It's kind of like doing all you can to do all you can. You're placed where you're placed. I mean, we're here where we're here, if you will. God doesn't make mistakes, and He places us on parts of the earth, and that's how we can even have that word be something. Being a native to somewhere, meaning like that's your origin. That's where you're rooted. That's where you're from. And I mean, my ancestors, they're not from the United States of America, but unless you're like an actual Native American, like Indian, like from a tribe that was here before people sailed across, and really established this place as modern day United States of America, then then none of us otherwise are actually like native back then, but I was born here, and I've had generations of family here before me. Utah's my home, and God doesn't make mistakes in where He places us and in what He does for us. That doesn't mean we all have our plan from God to be staying in the place He placed us necessarily. Sometimes it is His plan for us to move, for any reason, and sometimes really big reasons. But I'm Utah native. I mean, I can say that. It's just, yeah, I can say that. I need to be okay with that being okay with me. I need to be able to have that sound all right to myself. Yeah, because that's not wrong. I'm Utah native. I mean, I was born here. Yes, I'm native to this state in the United States of America. I truly am. I mean, yeah, I need to not have a problem with saying that. For some reason, that's something that, yeah, as you can tell, is the way that it is. No, that's entirely fine to say. I think it's just because I didn't know who I was for a long time, but I love Utah. Let me see if this is this shirt. Yeah, it is. I've got this shirt here that says Alberta, Utah, US Highway 6, Alberta is just a town. In Utah, US Highway 6, I actually only live about I don't know, maybe 8 minutes give or take from Highway 6, like where I'm sitting right now, I mean, the highway spans quite a distance, but I just love little things like this, and it's stuff like this specific one shirt here that I've worn in past In the Image Clothing Company videos. It's things like this, and the episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled "Cherish It," where I talked about this little book of quad scriptures, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Holy Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. These 4 books that have books within them as well. It's this little like compact small version compared to the bigger size. I actually have one right there that's just about the exact same. It's got the silver edges and the blue leather binding with the buckle, but it's a bigger size. This little size isn't all that common, and I actually was looking for one of this size for quite some time. That's what I talked about in that episode titled Cherish It, under In the Image Clothing Company podcast. It's about these little things, where we can't get too big for them. That's what I mean. The joy that comes from just the little print on this shirt that says Utah on it. It makes me feel good, I mean, we can't get too big for our hometowns. We can't get too big thinking we have to move to some big city. And then what happens so often in such, I mean, just probably the vast majority, but if not, just it happens often, of cases that people move from their hometown to like a big city, is they don't feel at home anymore. They feel like they're missing home. They feel like they're lacking things, when there's more stuff around. That's what I mean. They got too big for their hometown and then essentially got too big for themselves. They felt inauthentic and they don't feel content anymore. And so, yeah, under In the Image Clothing Company, we'll always just, as I word it, and that might be how we continue to word it, like live up Utah. I love that phrasing. It just came out one day, and it feels so right. So that might be how we just about always phrase that, just when we talk about Utah being our home state, right? Live up Utah. And there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Utah. And I just talked about, the landscape, the environment here, the mountains, and yeah, that we'll have our building here, In the Image Clothing Company, where we have our poodles, where we ship our products out. We won't have an actual place for you to come in to buy clothing, but what we get into there, because I've been thinking a little bit about maybe what we can do as far as, potentially some things more than what I've said, maybe, but our building, yeah, definitely will be a good place to house the poodles, to bathe the poodles, to groom the poodles, for the poodle puppies to be in when they're being born, and yeah, it'll be really great, man, where our team can be, and it'll be awesome. But this will all happen in Utah, the state of Utah here, man, and we just can't get too big for stuff, I've got roots that I gotta stay attached to. I mean, that's what that is, right? I just, yeah, just like the tree in the front yard. I don't know the chords, and I could probably figure it out. I just don't want to be like playing through chords right now for this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast to try to figure it out during this. I don't know. Maybe I'll never play that again, but it was just a freestyle I made one time because I was seeing people in my life who weren't content, and they were trying to escape, essentially, running, this idea of running, you know, talk about how running's damaging to the body. No claim, but we talk about it as it is, all the impact to every joint in the body. And, the clothing people are within when they run is usually just destroying their body, putting it in incorrect positions to begin with, and then they run in it. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Running, and I discussed it pretty darn thoroughly in there. Oh shoot. But, you know, it's just how it is, right? Running is damaging to the body, but then also running isn't good. Running from things in our life, even when it's hard, running from accountability, that's not a good thing to do. Nope. Running to things in our life, right? Things we think we want until we get them, and then we just feel like we need more, and you'll never get enough of what's not for you. And there's so much in this world to choose from, right? But if we can stay out of the world and just be in it but not of it, then we can be content with Jesus Christ being all that we have. Yeah, darn. Yep. And so this is what I mean, is don't get too big for things, right? Don't try to be bigger than you are. And that's what it says, right? Don't run faster than you have strength, right? In scripture. I mean, don't try to do more than you can do on your own. We have to rely on God for everything. And that's the thing, is God himself, he says about himself, Jesus Christ says, he is meek and lowly in heart. He talks about himself being the one who came to minister or serve rather than being ministered unto or being served by people, right? He came to serve us, even though he's almighty and we're just his children. He's not too big for us because he doesn't need us at all, but he humbled himself as a man and came to earth and died in our place to atone for our sins as our Savior, Jesus Christ, right? This is what I mean, is this is a biblical, doctrinal, eternal, you could say the word concept, but it's not a concept, it's discussion, right? Or explanation of just life, right? Don't get too big for anything, just because you're not, is really what it boils down to. Yeah. I mean, even just childlike things, little events and activities or snacks. I've been eating, what I have here is just sourdough bread. It's just, store-bought loaf, but it's sourdough type. And I put peanut butter and jelly on it, mix it up, so it's like the peanut butter and jelly is all really mixed together on there. And then I take cereal, like these little toasted oats cereal, and I sprinkle it on top of the bread. Well, really, I lay them out like really nicely right next to each other on top of the peanut butter and jelly on the bread. And I just eat that, it's like a piece of toast, but I don't toast it. And yeah, some people in my life have seen me eating that lately, like playing sports at what we call sports nights, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and just walking around, eating it as I do. People have seen me with it, and I've said, yeah, it feels like a little kid's snack kind of meal, and that's what we need to be able to do, is not be too big for these simple things in our lives, because it brings me a lot of joy. I love it, and it's stuff like this where this is what keeps us rooted and grounded. This is what keeps us joyful and childlike and humble, really, to a degree. And there's a lot of sides to humility. The word humble has a lot of different ways you can explain what that means. We'll probably do that. Probably. No guarantees, but one day, probably, an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast will be probably titled something like maybe what humility really means, something like that, because it's a very misunderstood thing. I mean, God is perfectly humble, but he's perfectly almighty, So anyway, just don't get too big for little things, Yeah, that's really sweet, man. Well, guitars, dude. I mean, we've talked about, like I said, little things before on the Image Clothing Company podcast, but But yeah, I talk about the sizing and setup of guitar. You have to have a fairly small guitar, otherwise you alter your whole body, right? Don't get too big for it, thinking the bigger guitar you get, um, you know, whatever. And we could get into all that, but I don't want to be redundant saying, just about physically big things, um, versus little things I've already talked about in one of our episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. But yeah, check that out, right? The Little Things, if you'd like to. That's the title. I think that's the exact title. Oh boy. It's something like that, at least. But a big thing is, just not outgrowing stuff. Not feeling like we're too good for things, not feeling like I said that word earlier, but graduated. Man, there was a time, it was in this about 13-month period that I had voluntarily removed my records from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was going to a different Christian church at the time, and I didn't want to help out with the trash. Well, I mean, there's more to it than that. It's funny because I volunteered to stay after and help with the trash cans, right? To just serve. I mean, when you're in the service of your fellow men, you're only in the service of your God. If that's how it's worded, that's might be slightly paraphrasing, but in scripture, we talk about these things where, like Jesus Christ said, well, inasmuch as you have done it to the least of these, my brethren, you have also done it to me, is what Jesus Christ says. Serving our fellow men is the same as serving God. He says that to us, right? The two great commandments, firstly, is the greatest commandment of all, to serve or to love God with all your heart, might, mind, strength, soul, your whole being is the point. And then secondly, to love your neighbor as yourself. And when we serve people around us, we're serving God. And there's no point in your life you're ever going to be too big for dirty jobs. I was a janitor for quite some time, and I could have a whole story about that. I have a lot of stories about it, but we could do a whole podcast episode on just my experience as a janitor. I think I have that actually written as a potential episode to film of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, because there's a lot of beautiful lessons in that to talk about and teach, and that I learned personally by being a janitor or a custodial person, right? Like building maintenance is what it really could be called as well. But anyway, yeah. If you think you've outgrown stuff like taking out trash, you're a teenager maybe, like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. You're 20 years old, 30 years old, but let's say you want to have a kid someday. All of a sudden you have children, and what do you have that comes with children? Dirty diapers, right? Talk about outgrowing dirty jobs as like a big old teenager. All of a sudden you're into your next phase in life, and you've got children, and you're cleaning their diapers. You didn't get too big for it. It just maybe is coming in a different package now than whatever chores your parents told you to do as kids. But now it's like, I'm not a kid anymore. My parents don't tell me to do chores. Well, now you have your own kids, and you're doing chores in a different way, right? By changing their diapers or cleaning up their spit up. And same with dogs, our poodles. That's what I mean is just because I'm the founder of In the Image Clothing Company doesn't mean I'm going to try to get out. Well, I mean, in times, I'm not going to spend all my time cleaning up the dog doo-doo when we have employees that, will have income that we will be giving them, right? We'll pay them to do so, right? Give them compensation for it. But meaning it's not like I'm too big at any point to clean up dog doo-doo, no, I'm not going to be cleaning up all of the doo-doo from all of our dogs. We'll have so many dogs, and I've got stuff that I've got to be doing as the person in charge of the whole company, but that's what I mean is there is that balance where there are some things where, yeah, you don't you don't do it as much in certain times in your life, Let's say you start out as a janitor, custodial person, right? Building maintenance type of person. And do what some people do in life and you work your way up in a company. And then you become this person who's let's say you become the head of the company. You are the CEO, the chief executive officer at some point. Um, no, you're not going to be taking out 50 plus trash bags a day, probably anymore, like you did when you were a janitor. But you can still take out your own trash bags in your office if and where you do, right? Or you could still help out the janitor every now and then if he needs something. You're not too big for that. But that's why I'm saying there's kind of like it's on both ends to a degree. You're also not just, in the same position you were. Because we do grow as human beings and we do grow as people. We do grow in our capability and in our understandings and in our intentionalities towards things and the focus we put and where we put it on things in our lives. But, you know, not to the degree that we ever become like too good or too big for anything, really, truly. Seriously. No, right? And that's the thing is the balance, opposition in all things, and we sit somewhere in between. Well, I call it the space in between, that's a little bit different. That's when I say, we look at everything in life and we don't involve ourselves with just this or just the thing that's opposing it, but we see things as they are, between everything, there's just truth. That's really what I mean by the space in between. But at the same time, there is kind of a space in between where you can be the head of something, the leader of something, the chief of something, right? That's just what the phrasing is for that title, chief executive officer, which really just means the big dog, right? The highest person in charge, the president of something, right? Yeah, the owner. Okay, these things, but that doesn't ever mean that you have to, and it doesn't mean that you ever do, because you don't get too big for any job that's anywhere in between, right? So this is beautiful, man. It's a cool discussion because this is for everybody. It's not only first world America, modern day 2025, right, where we've got big businesses and big companies and stuff like this. It's even in little villages in third world countries where, I mean, there's still usually, well, it's funny we use the word chief, right? That's usually the word that gets used for a tribe, right? The chief of the tribe. See what I mean? You've got like 20 people in your tribe and you live in a village in some like small area in Africa, or like, the country of Laos. I don't know how you say it for sure. I think the S might be silent. But you know what I mean? Just like somewhere on the earth where maybe you're in like a rainforest. You don't have all these big buildings and stuff. So it's like, well, no, I'm not a CEO, but you still might be the chief of the village, and you're not going to ever get too big for or like too good for the jobs that the children do, I guess, right? In cases like that to help out. You know what I mean? You're just not. You're not. So right? It's the pride cycle. It's what we deal with as human beings, and it's the human condition. And uh every one of us, again, that word us means Evan Strong too, the one speaking. I'm not up here on a pedestal. I'm actually sitting on the carpet on the floor of a bedroom. For those in audio only, right? Of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. There's your context. This is where I've been sitting for almost every episode up until this one, at least. It's just on the floor when I film these, and well, there's a lot of reasons to that, right? The human body, we don't want to sit in chairs and have weight on our hamstrings and deactivate our legs down to our feet arches and our whole bodies, right? One size fits the really tall guy is an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. I discussed that, the functionality of the body in a world that's made by mankind. Chair heights, is a big thing. They damage the body. But Anyway, there's a lot we get into. That's what I'm in. This is In the Image Clothing Company, bro. I'm in this for life. And um, so stick around, right? Don't let me get too big for things. But the big thing is really the title of this, because we do so much with dogs, a lot of it is advocating for giving your dog the attention they need. Because they need it. Your children do too, like I'm saying with anything. Just don't get too big for it. Don't think you've outgrown something that you haven't, because you haven't. And you'll actually find more joy in the little things, taking it back to basics. That sounded like I was starting to rap a little bit. Taking it back to basics. Yeah. Shout out to In the Image Clothing Company music, but it's those simple things, So don't get too big for them. And well, another big thing, I should address this in this. I had this idea going along with this when I thought I was going to make this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. We talk about large dog breeds, and I don't want people to feel bad like I'm talking down on small dog breeds, but it's similar to what I say when I say a mutt is a mutt, meaning a mixed dog breed is like, well, it's not purebred. It's going to have health complications coming from both breeds. There's actual reasons to have purebred dogs. Another thing we advocate for, well, encapsulated in just discussing proper breeding and showing it under In the Image Clothing Company poodles. But, I don't want to have people feel bad, but I'm going to say what I say. I'm not so fond of small dogs. There's a lot of reasons. You can step on them easy. They're usually yappy, and there's a lot of reasons that come from their actual size that cause them to be yappy. Also, most small dogs have been bred down in size, and it's something that does bring health complications. Just think about the animals that dogs would be eating, hunting to survive in nature. And little dogs could only hunt things that are smaller than them, usually, right? It'd be very hard for them to take down a larger animal than them. So you think about wild dogs, and they're, like our large-sized dog breeds that we have domesticated, or even bigger. Wolves are bigger than most all, even large dog breeds, as far as domestic dogs. But like a coyote, we have those here in the state of Utah, just wild coyotes. That's, very, very similar, just about exactly the same size as a standard poodle. Yeah, seriously. They've got big, long, bushy tails. Well, poodles can have very bushy tails. Poodles have hair, but they don't have quite as long of tails in the same way. Anyway, even like a fox, like a red fox is bigger than so many really small dog breeds nowadays. I wanted to incorporate this in this and include this in here. A lot of it's for the date marking to show that I was, discussing these things now before any more time goes by. Just a lot of it's to show that how much reason, I guess we can say, that there is for 1/4 of us being In the Image Clothing Company poodles. We really talk about this deeply. All that we talk about, the reason for In the Image Clothing Company poodles, well, there's a lot of them, a lot of reasons. And small dog breeds can actually have a lot of not so good things that come with them. Some of the things I've mentioned in this, right? So we talk about large dog breeds, and so when I say don't get too big for your dog, there's a lot of good reasons to have a large dog breed as the dog you choose to have. There really is. Even things like complications in pregnancies happen more with smaller dogs because they have a smaller pelvis. It's harder for the puppies to come out. So more C-sections, cesarean births happen, probably at least. And this would be the reason, is what I'm saying, with a small dog than a large dog. Large dogs have bigger pelvises. Puppies are small, and they can fit through the larger pelvis of a larger dog easier than like a little terrier or like toy size poodle, for example, right? Again, toy size, when I say large dogs have just been bred down in size, that's where these small dogs have come from. Other than, specific breeds. There's some fairly small dogs that are, pretty natural. But, that's why it's the word standard poodle. That's the standard size. That's how the size was. And then they started breeding them down smaller to be a little bit more portable and to be used in different ways, like hunting dogs. They breed them to fit into holes, burrows of animals and stuff, right? So there's reasons for it, and some of them aren't all that bad, and some of them are very beneficial, and then in betweens, because some of the really beneficial reasons can still come with like health complications and stuff as well. Right. So we get into it, right? When I say we talk about things in depth, when I say I speak very well, it's not me trying to like push some advertisement to get people to hopefully care about what we do. It's to explain, like, no, we really do. Um, yeah, in the Image Clothing Company is what I mean, right? We speak on things very deeply and all in all the ways we can objectively, without having opinions. That's what truth means, is all opinions aside. We try, but we're human beings, right? We're imperfect, and we've got opinions where we do, just because that's human nature, okay? Commanded to overcome the natural man and become as God is, right? But yeah, right? But we're still human beings. I mean, that's the whole point of this life is being what we are. And kind of, finding that middle ground. That's what I'm saying. Actually, a lot in this is there's there's a middle ground to a lot of this stuff that's good. There's good things on either end of stuff. There's opposition in all things. So anyway, small dog breeds can have more complications in a lot of ways than large dog breeds. They really can. And there's things that come with large dog breeds that, aren't all that ideal, that wouldn't be in small dog breeds as well. But you know, yeah. Our bodies as human beings, as the owners of dogs, we don't want to be too big for our dogs physically. If me being 6 foot 2 inches tall, Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, tries to get down to a toy-sized poodle, even a miniature poodle, the word miniature means medium-sized when it comes to poodles, by the way. They're medium-sized dogs. To me, they seem small, right? I feel too big for a dog like that, and it actually can wear me out. It can make me more tired than I would need to be. It can actually do more damage to my body. And that doesn't need to be some kind of like fearful thing, but just truly. I mean, you bending down even farther than you would need to in times in life, right? Earth's gravity, hinges, levers. The body's just a mechanical machine. You'll have more strain on joints if you're just bending down often to deal with a dog that's only like a foot off the ground. Toy poodles are 10 inches or shorter at the withers. That's a small dog. Its head's like somewhere around, well, just barely over 10 inches tall. The withers are the top of the shoulders of the dog. So, its head's just a couple inches, a few inches tall. I'm bending down to the ground, down to where like my socks are, just to play with a toy-sized poodle, right? If I'm wearing tall socks, like that's a far distance for me to bend down versus a large-sized dog. And I've talked about this a lot since I've talked about this a fair bit. I'm talking about it now is the point. This is a good thing to mention, like I'm saying, as of today's date. This is good. Documentation. I love it. In the Image Clothing Company. Check us out, brother. You're already in this if you're hearing me speak. But in the Image Clothing Company poodles, yeah, that's one of the big reasons we specialize in standard size dogs, is so we're not physically too big for our dogs, for it to be comfortable for us as the owners to get to our dogs, because I don't have to bend down at all. Standard size poodle, I can just reach my arm, well, not even reaching, but just with my arm down at my sides. Even though I'm 6'2" tall, I can pet the head of a standard size poodle, just standing normally. And then, yeah, having a little dog, the dog themselves too is always looking up at you, higher than they'd naturally just be looking. And then with their tail wagging and their neck like cranked up like that, spinal problems, seriously. And this is real stuff that a lot of people don't talk about a lot. A lot of people just wouldn't know, right? No fault of their own, but that's what I say. You don't know what you don't know. Under In the Image Clothing Company, we talk about things that are just so immensely damaging our bodies and life, and people just have no idea it's even happening. So this is one of those things, So, yeah, having a dog big enough, physical size-wise, to where it's comfortable for the dog so they're not looking up excessively, so they're not trying to jump up on their hind legs. Well, so they're not getting hurt, getting in and out of vehicles, getting stepped on. I mean, these are things that don't happen with what we could see as normal dogs. And that's what I mean. I don't mean to be mean, but that's how it is. We've bred these dogs down over generation and generation of dogs to be small so that they can like go with us everywhere, be companion dogs. Like, you hear the term purse dog. A little toy poodle could literally fit in a purse, That's cool. It's cute, times and places. But dogs originally were used for something. They were working dogs, hunting dogs, cattle dogs, sheep dogs. These things is the reason why people owned dogs to begin with. And then, well, I mean, they were also companions, as well. But in modern day, so many people have dogs just for companionship. There's nothing wrong with that. That's amazing, right? Service dogs, therapy dogs, emotional support dogs, or just, parts of the family. They're just, that's entirely fine. That's good. I mean, that's great. That's an amazing thing that dogs are able to do for us as human beings, is those things. But a big thing is when the dog gets so small, things like what I was saying with the complications in pregnancies, because the puppies can't fit through their pelvis. So they have to actually be cut out of the abdomen. That's what a cesarean or a C-section birth is. Human beings, that happens with sometimes, right? But it's actually coming through breeding. It's a not so good complication that can happen with small dogs. And dogs getting stepped on, dogs, getting in and out of cars, going up and down stairs. It can be a lot on the joints. Little puppies, you don't want them to go up and down stairs for the first little while. Even if they can do it, it's a lot of impact on their growing joints, just like children of human beings. So this is really what we do, this is a good thing. We're really into this, man. I mean, I've been feeling like a good, I don't want to say shift as in like we're changing what we do, but shifting forward, if you will, kind of like a jump start. The past even just few days of In the Image Clothing Company, and well, where my physical body is as well. I've had to get my body out of these patternings, right? I mean, it's been crazy. And so now that I'm at the point that I'm at, and with the discussions we have, and with the foundation laid as it is for In the Image Clothing Company, for life, I mean, this is what it is. Episode 100, for example, of In the Image Clothing Company podcast is titled Laying a Foundation. A lot of this, I mean, yeah, I mean, I make this and then it's here for life, that's what I mean. So I'm to a point now where we're kind of like crossing a threshold of, like I'm saying, change in the sense of progression, in a way that can happen now because of how much is laid up until now as a foundation of what we are. And it's been kind of like rapid the past few days, in ways that are probably more than what people could see, because it's in me as well as the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. So why I'm saying that right now, or like why this brought that to my attention right now, is because giving all this information, this is what I mean, any brands we work with for dogs, dog food brands. I've mentioned Pure Harmony. I feel like we'll end up working with them someday, shout out, just free shout outs like this to people who are doing good things without compensation, but maybe one day we'll have kind of compensation on both ends, in the ways that happens. Maybe just advertisement from us and free products from certain people, or, stuff like that. Yeah, right, because we'll do that. Yeah. That's what I mean, is people that are doing good things that want to work with us if they know we're doing good things, right? Yeah. So there you go, right? Don't get too big for your dogs. And what I was saying there is there's what I have said actually quite a bit, and we'll talk about it always, because it's just the case mechanically for the human body. It's beneficial to have a big dog. It is. Even though now you've got like a 60, 70 plus pound dog. I mean, you've got dogs over 100 pounds easily. Some of these dogs, some big dogs, Mastiffs, Great Danes, Bernese Mountain Dogs, man, you know, I'm thinking of that one breed that's, I don't know what it is. I've been having a hard time remembering what that breed is each time I think about it the past little while. There was a movie titled Beethoven, and there was a big dog in there, whatever that dog breed is. I mean, there's some dogs well over 100 pounds. Um, and so, you know, that can be hard to move those dogs around if you needed to. You know, I'm thinking about like an elderly dog has a harder time getting in and out of a something that you'd have to lift it to be able to do, you know. And I get it. There's things that does come with big dogs, but in most all cases, it's actually very, very, very beneficial to have a large dog. Um, yeah. So don't get too big for your dogs. Don't get a dog that's too small for you. Seriously. Heard with context, and I've given a lot here, and we'll talk about it more just going forth under In the Image Clothing Company poodles specifically, and then wherever else we do under the other three sides of In the Image Clothing Company. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But there you go. Don't get too big for your dog, right? Seeing in all the ways that I've discussed it here, because we don't actually outgrow things, and sometimes we feel like we have. And then that's when we start to feel like we're not ourselves. Yeah, trying to live up to things that we can't live up to, you know, and that's really what that becomes. Uh-huh. No label or titling will ever change you or better you at all. It can put you in positions where you can do really great things, but it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't. And, well, okay, let's say this while we're saying that. As we say, as it is, the truth is, the only titling or labeling that is ever actually true to who you are is a son for those males out there, or a daughter for those females out there, of God. That's it. And that's where it always comes back to. And that's how you don't ever get too big for anything, is realize that God's always above us, you know. We're just his children. And yeah. Shoot. The 5th of October, 2025, today's date, man. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. Stick around for the poodles. I've given a lot of explanation on a lot of what we do under In the Image Clothing Company poodles in this specific episode 164 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled Don't Get Too Big for Your Dog. Okay? So stick around for the poodles. Just do it, man. You don't have to. Stop back in though if you want to, or just never listen to us again if you want to. That's your choice as well. In the Image Clothing Company, man. But Poodle Parade events, if you're around here, man, I mean, I don't expect people to be coming from far and wide, but you know, if you're already in Utah, or if you do want to come from wherever you are, Poodle Parade events, man, come to them, you know. And we just have events in the ways that we do under In the Image Clothing Company. And you can just see what we do through the poodles as well, under the gift of video. Just look up. You don't even have to look up In the Image Clothing Company poodles specifically. Look up In the Image Clothing Company, our 5-word name as a whole. Anywhere you can find